All right. It says we're live and recording. So welcome, everyone. I see we have some people online with us now. Feel free to drop us a quick comment in the comment box just to let us know where you're joining us from so we know where you're at. But just wanted to quickly start with an introduction. My name is Jake Stika. I'm the executive director of an organization called Next Gen Men, committed to promoting positive masculinities, healthy relationships, and gender equity in schools, communities, and workplaces. I use the pronouns he, him, and I'm here this morning with my good friend Sarah over several years. Gotten to know her. Do you want to give us maybe just a quick intro to yourself, Sarah, and then I'll circle back on a couple of housekeeping pieces, and then we'll jump into a conversation.
Yeah, so hi all. My name is Sarah Saska. My pronouns are she and her. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of an organization called Feminuity. So we're a full-service diversity, equity, inclusion strategy firm working largely with folks in the sort of tech and innovation ecosystem.
Awesome. And I have a very important note here. You are dog mom too?
Gordon.
Chief Marketing Officer at Feminuity.
Very important job.
Exactly. We're going to have a really great discussion, but I just wanted to frame the type of dialogue that we're going to have through Next Gen Men's values. One is curiosity to learn and unlearn. 2 is empathy to build bridges. 3 is courage to take action. And 4 is equity to remove barriers. And based on all the discussions that we've had, I'm sure it'll be really good. Normally, much like the rest of us, I'm sure you're used to doing a lot of these events and conversations in person. And in person, we would do a land acknowledgement. But with folks from Calgary, Muskoka, Toronto, Vancouver on the line tonight, it's this morning at 8 a.m. I'm still drinking my first coffee. It gets hard to do a specific land acknowledgement. So I've been practicing over the past couple of weeks, just holding space for a thought in and around truth and reconciliation. And I thought I'd share a quick story. We have a few different staff that handle communications at Next Gen Men. And in one of our newsletters over the weekend, we used the term circle the wagons. And one of our community members reached out to us and called us in so very nicely. I believe in your work, but this term isn't, inclusive. It can be exclusive. It has anti-Indigenous sentiment, and it gave us a really good opportunity to own our mistake, to educate our community. So we sent a quick follow-up email to almost 1,000 people saying, hey, this is what's up with this term. And I think, as we practice diversity and inclusion, we're going to get called in that way. But it's an opportunity to learn and educate and grow. And we're committed to doing that. So I just wanted to quickly share that story.
And can you share the feedback that you got? Like, can you help folks understand the why?
Yeah, so it was basically, if we think about early settler days, circle the wagons was very much something as settlers were proceeding across the prairies that, they would yell out to, protect themselves from Indigenous, savages or whatever terms they were using at the time. And, we as a society and the fabric of society has changed so much and also levied all of the colonial things that we've done against Indigenous people, from, the 60s scoop to residential schools to missing and murdered Indigenous women. There's a lot of trauma in those communities, and to use that type of language just kind of perpetuates that us versus them type of thing. And, I think there's a lot of calling out that happens in circles today, kind of a woke Olympics. And, I really appreciated our community member couching this with, I believe in your work, I appreciate it. When we owned our mistake and sent it out, I got so many emails just saying, I appreciate that. I didn't know it was a problem. Thank you for that. And one troll, but you always get those trolls, but it's all good.
Someone's learning already.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to jump into a few conversation pieces here. There's the chat bar there. If any questions come up for you from the conversation, feel free to plug those in there. Sarah and I are just going to riff for a bit, but then we do have some time reserved at the end where I'll kind of moderate the questions and we'll go through them. That should be good. So really, I wanted to reach out to you because was it just last week or was it 2 weeks ago? I'm losing track of time.
I think almost 2 weeks now.
Wow. Feminuity put out this amazing resource called Fostering Belonging Through Inclusive and Accessible Remote Working Practices. And now that we're all kind of stay at home, we have our essential workers working out in the field as they need to, but many organizations overnight have transformed into remote organizations. Yeah. So I wanted to just start with what compelled you to putting this stellar resource together.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling it stellar. It was very much a team effort, a communal effort. I think from our perspective, over the years, and then most recently in the last few months, few weeks, we witnessed sort of the flood of resources that talk about how to support teams to work remotely or to transition to working remotely. And there's so many really thoughtful resources out there. But from our perspective, we felt we needed to center the conversation around remote working practices that are both accessible and inclusive. Because we're already aware of all the different sort of varied and complex ways that equity and inclusion challenges show up in real time in workplaces, right? In brick and mortar, it's sort of in human form. And I think there's a lot of things that we just simply don't know, right? We don't know what certain types of inequity or lack of inclusion are going to look or feel like in remote models right now. There's lots that we can predict, right? There's lots of groups that we can suspect will have certain struggles in particular ways, but there's also just I think a lot of wild cards right now. So that's why we wanted to center this conversation, at least get people sort of thinking through these lenses, so that there's certain things they can set up and work to proactively do better with now, but that they're also continuing to ask the questions and getting feedback from their people and sort of iterating their remote working process in real time. And so one of the sort of the critical conversations, one of many, was around caregiving. And so from our perspective, we wanted to ensure that the conversation around caregiving was really expansive, right? That we're talking about all of the different ways that people provide care, whether that's to aging parents or spouses or folks living with disabilities, including spouses, or kids, babies, whatever that sort of looks or feels like, even neighbors, right? We wanted to make sure that we had sort of a broad definition of caregiving at play for people to think through. And that's also why we wanted to bring you into the conversation, because while we know that women tend to sort of bear the brunt of many of these sort of caregiving tasks, there's just a really important conversation as it relates to how men and boys provide caregiving, all sorts of forms, right? So that's where we wanted to sort of have a conversation with you, and given your expertise and background, and for you to be part of that sort of community process and contributing to the conversation.
No, I really appreciate that. And just for anyone watching, this is a pretty new platform for me as well, but there's apparently a call to action. So I added a button beneath our conversation, which links to the Feminuity resource. So you can check it out there. But kind of on that caregiving piece, you had already built out the majority of the thing, and I felt very special to be asked to kind of fill that one piece. And it was a really great thing to plug, how men's ideas of caregiving are transforming. We know that fathers this generation are 3 times more engaged with their children than the generation prior. Yet we know that, parental leave used by men is still quite stigmatized in terms of like career suicide and those kinds of things. And so that just kind of compounds this pressure that a lot of men are feeling. And then, just last night we did one of our community discussions called Dads Under Duress, and we had 18 dads from across Canada on the line talking about their differing experiences, from an expectant father to a 2-month-old to like 20-year-olds, right? And it's just they talked about how rich of an experience it was to come and join a space where there was men talking about caregiving. And how I often just think about how transformative that would be in workplaces, if we were able to have the culture where we talked about those things, because it would be kind of like a win-win-win. Organizations wouldn't be able to take for granted anymore that just birthing parents are taking time off, so they would have to plan for men to do so. Men would gain better relationships with their partners because they would be in it with them, like fully, and not leaving for a period of time. And they would gain competence with their children, right? Rather than just coming home and being handed a baby and told, do this, this, and this, they would have that kind of parental intuition. And, I think that anytime that we can highlight that is important. And when I think about like the work from home context, we all think about that viral video, the gentleman who was on the BBC last year or a couple of years ago, and the kid kind of comes barging in the room. And I really think that one of the reasons that went so viral is because how human it was, right? We being a parent is quite normal in our culture, in our society. So I really appreciated being able to contribute to that.
Also, the young one that came sort of bustling in was just so adorable. So that didn't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, just because I can see the other window here, our hack seems to have stopped working for the subtitles here. But I'm not going to put you on the spot to try and fix it. We did attempt it. If you can. Oh, here we go.
It's there.
It's working. Yeah, we got closed captioning again.
Okay. Okay. Is it still going right now?
Yeah, it's still going right now.
Should we explain what we've sort of tried to do here?
That's what I was going to kick it over to, and the opportunities we have in this time to be innovative and learn on the fly. So, please explain how we created this closed captioning.
Well, so last night when we were sort of trialing this platform, we were trying to figure out if it had the capabilities. From our understanding, Crowdcast doesn't have the capability to offer closed captioning. If we're wrong, please let us know. We'd love to sort of know differently. So what we've done is I am sharing a screen on my laptop. And in that one screen, I have opened up a Google slide presentation, and I have taken the Google slide presentation into presenter mode and then turned on closed captioning there. And so we just made a blank screen in the hopes that the captions will show up a little bit more clearly. So it's certainly not a perfect solve, and we'd love to learn what other folks are doing to sort of fill the gaps with technologies that aren't, fully at the standards that we, hope them to be in time.
Yeah, but it looks really good, even just right now. And I'm always amazed with the technology of picking up the cadence and words that people are using. So that's awesome. And so, I know Feminuity's work for a long time has looked at the systemic issues that exist in our society and the fabric of society today, but how they look in workplaces. And in this shifting landscape, there's a leveling happening. There's certain inequities that might be lessened. Let's say kind of work from home is flexi work type stuff, and we're accommodations being made for people, those kinds of things. But on the flip side of that, there's also some certain things that are being exacerbated as well too. So I just wanted to kick it over to you, and what are you thinking about? What are you seeing? How are you talking with your clients about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting. Like the folks living with disabilities, like folks in sort of disability-centered communities, like I understand the frustration that, hey, I asked to be able to work from home many moons ago, and had to turn down certain jobs, or because they simply couldn't accommodate it, right? They said it simply wasn't possible, or certain folks who had to provide different types of caregiving. Like I'm hearing people who are really frustrated that even their current jobs, when they joined maybe a year or two ago, they were said that, sorry, it's not possible. We can't accommodate a remote working model, and sometimes we can't even, accommodate sort of like a more flexible sort of working model, right? Where perhaps you just work remotely 1 day a week. And that sucks, right? It sucks to hear this. So I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how organizations sort of determine to move forward as we, design and build our sort of our new normal. So I think, there's certain people who are definitely sort of benefiting, and this is sort of more helpful to sort of their needs and their life sort of structures. But I think other folks are all struggling in new and different ways, right? We're seeing the rise of domestic violence and, just sort of the weight of sort of caregiving and how that's really taking a toll on a lot of folks right now as examples. I think at a super high level, this sort of crisis is showing us that, all of these sort of systems that we already knew weren't doing too well, are ultimately very much broken now, right? And there isn't going to be sort of a going back with a lot of these systems. And I think sorry?
We hope.
Well, I think it's up to us, right? It's up to folks who are working in social justice spaces and activist spaces. And I think it's like, government leads, politicians, but also leaders of organizations to not allow, right, us to sort of revert back to whatever that sort of normal used to be. I'm getting really frustrated with folks who are saying, we're in unprecedented times and, this is sort of a stopgap until we go back to, business as usual, or we go back to our normal. I think that's bullshit, right? I think that's like not really sort of thoughtful. It just feels really insufficient. Because I don't think we're going to have sort of the same world to go back to. And I also think we have to ask bigger questions about why would we want to go back to certain models, right, that haven't been working and then also got us here to an extent in the first place.
Yeah, no, I'm really hopeful for that reality as well too. I think, one of the things that has really stuck with me somewhere, I saw pandemics don't break things, they show what's already broken. Totally. And if we look at let's say compensation structures, I'm thinking of the Toronto Star right now, where they want a government bailout and they paid their top 6 executives an exorbitant amount. And the next 89 people below them could make $53,000 a year off of that, right? And looking at that, and this morning I woke up and I saw that Jack Dorsey of Twitter and Square put 28% of his wealth into an organization to fund COVID, right? And if someone has $1 billion to do that, should they? Right. And then, on even just the micro levels of, workplaces and those kinds of things. I know that flexible work, my father hated driving in traffic. It was bad for his mental health. So he shifted his work to 7 to 3. And he had to earn that privilege over time to do so. And so, on the macro, on the micro, we're going to be renegotiating a lot of things right now. I think we have a question here. I'm just going to read it out. I feel work from home was also a trust question, and this situation is forcing managers to question their ability to trust. Right? Do you want to answer that or talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. That's been a fairly common question that a lot of the leaders that we work with have been struggling with. How do I know that my team are actually doing the work? How do I know that they're putting in the hours? Those are the types of questions that we're getting. And I think this is sort of a really good time where we need to shift away from, if you're sort of privileged to be working in the knowledge economy in a way that allows you to work remotely, I don't think we should be so much focused on number of hours that folks are putting in at any given time. I think we need to be focused on deliverables, right? What are the sort of the key outputs, the key goals, the things that you're working towards, right? This is the time where if you don't have really good sort of one-on-one structures and feedback loops, and if you're not setting really appropriate goals with your people, now's the time to learn how to do all of that. Because once you have those systems in place, I think it's a lot easier to build trust with your people, but also that's how you keep accountability really moving. So if someone, if they need to check out for 3 hours in the middle of the day to, take care of, do things in their home, right? To sort of care for the folks around them, or, their Wi-Fi goes down or whatever it may be, right? Well, you need to trust that, they're going to figure it out, right? They know what their sort of their goals and deliverables are. So it doesn't matter if, that 3-hour sort of hiccup happened in any given day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for us to look back at the origins of the 8-hour workday as well, too, right? Like that came out of the Industrial Revolution and union organizing and those kinds of things. And they experimented with, 12-hour days, 10-hour days, 8-hour days. And that's where they found the highest level of, productivity. And that's, old school manufacturing and those kinds of things. And then, if we think about knowledge work, we really probably only get 4 to 5 productive hours a day. And if I, do a little bit of judo and I flip this as well too, something that really frustrates me is these conversations in and around meritocracy that often comes into. And people see the meritocracy leveling through what can you do in the 8 hours. But if we actually went by a meritocratic structure, why should someone who can do the work in 3 hours have to have the same experience as someone who needs 6, 7, 8 hours to do the same work, right? Like we're actually suppressing individuals. So that's something that I think about in this as well. We have a comment in the chat here. The data I have been wanting to see in all this is what the average salary is for the folks that have been deemed essential. A lot of them are hourly minimum wage jobs compared to all the people that are now safely working from home making 6-figure salaries. Yeah. Hopefully when this ends, there might be a reckoning. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. I think it's been an interesting moment for a lot of CEOs, execs, sort of leaders who, are sort of stuck at home behind their computer, and it's their people that are sort of working, out on the front lines and doing all those things. So I really hope this is a moment where folks really take pause and see who really does keep, that organization running and moving.
Yeah. And on top of that, just how we as individuals value them, right? Like, do we smile at the person at the grocery store? Do we acknowledge their existence? A lot of this is really invisible work that keeps society humming along. And, just the way that we've built capitalism right now is, not investing in people, trying to remove people from the equation, automation, checkouts, those kinds of things, fighting for, fighting against living wages and those kinds of things, while the top just gets these more and more exorbitant, payouts. And even you and I yesterday were talking about how do we tie top executive payout to the lowest employee payout as well too. I think will be a big part of the conversation moving forward as well after.
Yeah, and I'd love to see, like, to me, what this sort of all translates, not all, but some of it translates to in my head is, especially in the last little while, and I know that I sort of work with so many tech companies that I feel like my world is very tech-centric right now, but the conversations around innovation and the innovators and the entrepreneurs, right? That's been, that's been very sort of top of mind for some time now. But where's the conversation around the sustainers, the maintainers, right? The sustainers, the maintainers, they are the ones who allow folks the space and time and energy to even be able to do sort of the innovation, that side of it. So I think we really need to understand that there's no one without the other, right? That it's a deeply reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of bring it back to the resource, because I really want everyone to go check it out. You've broken it out into 3 kind of categories: virtual norms, virtual meetings, and virtual engagement. Can you give us a couple of examples, some sneak peeks of some of the norms, some of the things to think about with our meetings, and some of the things to think about engaging our employees remotely or virtually?
Yeah, I think with meetings, one of the things I really love is, and I think this really goes back to your piece around, caregiving and how we normalize and sort of evolve these conversations. I love the idea of having folks within organizations introduce the people who are buzzing around their home to their teams. It doesn't matter who it is. It can be, your child, your partner, your mom, your puppy, whoever that may be. I think that's really important because I've seen some folks who really just have this sort of stressed out, like anxious look on their face because I can see that they're like waiting in real time and hoping that their dog won't bark in the background or like the child won't come and sort of jump into the shot. So in those moments, I try to just pause any call, any conversation and say, hey, whoever's buzzing around there, we welcome them into the conversation. I think it's really an awesome sort of leading practice for teams to do that with all of the people that they have, all the people, pets, things buzzing around, to do that with their own teams. But I think it's also just kind of cool practice if you're having a conversation with a new organization, just people who are new to you, that you could sort of level set and right and say, hey, you might hear this and there's no need to apologize for that.
It brings the human back into the workplace, right? And kind of removes that, what we were just talking about, like we're not cogs in a machine, we're people collaborating and working together towards a shared goal. And I think it's a great recollection for that as well too. What about virtual like engagement? Right now, I think a lot of organizations are struggling. It's like, we used to have a pool table. We used to order lunch every 2 weeks. We used to do whatever. And I'm not saying that that's what makes companies good in terms of engagement, but what would you recommend for organizations that are thinking of how to engage their employees now?
Yeah, I think just creating different sort of touch points for folks to be able to talk about things that aren't deeply tied to an agenda or a deliverable or sort of the business. So when we do our team meetings, we kick off each sync each morning with one-word check-ins. So that's meant as, folks can share any word. It can be sort of where they're at emotionally, what's exciting to them. I don't know how they're feeling about the weather. It doesn't matter, but it doesn't need to be tied to the work or their tasks or whatever it is that they're taking on that day, though it could be. But we want open space for people to sort of share that there's something more sort of going on for them. We've also, I know a lot of organizations have been playing with the idea of the virtual water cooler or, sort of different models. But I think ultimately it's just open space and time for people to talk and just chat, right? That sort of had to have those organic conversations that don't need to be tied to an agenda.
Yeah. And I think the knee-jerk reaction right now, as we all experience a pandemic together, I listened to a podcast with Esther Perel over the weekend, and she explained how, folks ask, how's it going or something like that. And then, the classic response is, wife this, kids that, blah, 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 everything's fine. And then it's like, great, I'm glad that you told me how things are, but how are you? Right. And it's like actually having that space to share a feeling. And, I have good days and I have bad days. And sometimes it goes by the hours with this because we're all going through something together, and it doesn't make sense for us to suppress that or ignore it.
Yeah, I think, it's a really awesome sort of question. I also like to ask folks right now, maybe beyond sort of how are you doing? Because I think, people don't know how to answer that. I struggle myself, and I go to we're building a strategy. And I like asking folks right now, what are you learning? What are you learning about the world or yourself or your ability to be more on your own or your ability to not have any sort of personal time? What are you learning?
Yeah. And my favorite is when someone answers with fine, asking them if they're fucked up, insecure, needy, and emotional.
That seems like a good summary. Yeah.
That's my acronym there. So I wanted to kick it over. We have a couple people on the line still. It'd be great if there was some questions or some topics that are front of mind for you that we could share together. Just gonna give a second there for that. We even have the power to invite folks on screen if they wanted to be.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm learning. If you ask me what I'm learning about new tools that we can leverage to kind of simulate what the workplace is about.
Yeah, and technology companies are, have the ultimate sort of user testing going on right now.
Yeah.
So now's the time, when folks find new platforms, if you find gaps, issues, whatever, this is the time to share, because they are probably listening more than they've ever been listening before.
That's a great tip. We have a question here from Alyssa. What would you do if management is not talking to the team?
As in just not communicating, not engaging?
Alyssa, would you want to come up and share a little bit with us on a mic? Not engaging with what is going on. Okay.
Okay. So like engaging in sort of the quote unquote business as usual functional stuff, but just not
Right.
not
Yeah. Addressing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. I think there's a lot of leaders who just, there are a few leaders who actually know what the heck to be doing. But that's part of the leading process right now, to say, I don't know. Here, it's okay to share the things you have no clue about that just feel like an absolute sort of wild card to you. But to still be able to share the things that you do know, right? So if you know as an organization that you have runway for 6 months and that your folks will be able to be secure for that time, that's something to share with them, right? But if perhaps you don't know if the projects you've been working on might get canceled, or you have no idea what will happen after that 6 months, you can share that too. Like, there is power in being vulnerable and sharing all the things that sort of are challenging to you and are very much unknown to you in real time. I think a lot of leaders, there's this sort of idea that leaders need to lead in this sort of perfectionist mindset, right? That you lead once you understand what the heck you're supposed to share and how you're supposed to do it. Right? But the leaders who are self-reflexive and able to sort of check in and be vulnerable right now are the ones who I think will do the best.
Yeah. I think a lot about Deloitte's the design of the Everyday Man report, and there was 4 major themes that came out from that. And the first one was, it's on me. The second one is, I can't ask for help. The third one was, I don't have role models. The last one was, I don't remember what the last one was, but like, those are very masculine leadership traits. And we live in a society where we have deemed the kind of masculine traits as the desirable leadership ones, or hopefully we're transforming that now. But with that comes this idea of, emotionless, robotic, I know what I'm doing, I can do it, I'll get us through this. When the reality of it is, we don't have a pandemic playbook unless you were around during like the Spanish flu or something, right? And so I think it's important to be human and to guide from, like you said, that vulnerability and that transparency, and it'll build you a lot of credit and goodwill with your staff as well too. Yeah.
So if I guess, to Alyssa's question, if your leaders, your managers are not addressing this, I think if you have a relationship with them, now is a really good time to perhaps even check in with them, right? We also, leaders, managers, everyone's struggling in different ways, right? And it's also possible that that's also their sort of trauma response to this, is just to simply avoid it, right? This may just feel too big and heavy for them, sort of as a human, beyond the sort of their managerial hat right now. Yeah. But there are a lot of tools. So depending on the nature of the relationship, I'd say check in if you can. I really love so much of the work that Melissa and Jonathan Nightingale share. They've just launched a shorter version of their sort of Better Bosses type course. That's not what it's called, but and it's geared to support leaders right now in real time to sort of lead through this. I think it's about $100, and it's an e-learning course. So perhaps share something like that with that person. I haven't taken it personally, but I have taken their Better Boss course, and I thought it was great.
I will second the Melissa and Jonathan Nightingale plug. They are definitely, as a newer manager myself, role models to me. And so I definitely recommend that resource as well too. We have a question here from a Next Gen Men committee member. Hey, Steph, glad to have you on the line. I have read about the gender burden with additional household duties during the pandemic. What are you seeing and hearing?
I'm seeing a lot of folks who are very, very tired and overwhelmed and feel like they are working more and balancing more than ever before. And even as it relates to teams, there's been a lot of sort of research about office chores, office tasks, those unnamed tasks and how they're not equitably distributed in the context of workplaces. And that's just found its way into the remote setup now too, because now we have folks who need to perhaps take notes. They need to share out the notes. They need to send all of these calendar invites. They're probably more than ever before, right? Perhaps people who are transcribing in real time, depending on the platform you're using. All of those kind of things need to have system around it so that you don't have certain folks on your teams continuing to do the same tasks over and over, and that you're not contributing to that burden right now.
Yeah. A lot of what I've seen on the home front, like in gender inequitable relationships, obviously it's definitely being exacerbated right now. But there are, hidden opportunities within that. If I think about my home province of Alberta, unfortunately, the oil and gas sector is not only dealing with a pandemic, but a Saudi-Russian oil price war. And, there are, unfortunately, the rises in rates of domestic violence as well, too. But there's also a lot of men who are furloughed and laid off and finding themselves at home for the first time, especially, let's say, partners of healthcare workers, because we know that, nurses and stuff are predominantly female. So there's hopefully new opportunities for them to understand that burden and a capability, a scaling up of hopefully some of that sharing of those resources as well too. Steph just added that 77% of women are healthcare workers. So, think of how many of those are mothers and how many of those have partners. And so hopefully there's some opportunities in creating space to have the conversations in and around that is really important. And just building on again, how I was able to chime in on Sarah's resource, I think as male leaders in organizations, it's really important for us to role model our caregiving and our chipping in as we go. Something that I personally do is if I have, caregiving responsibilities, I don't have kids at this time, but my grandparents, last year I had to take some care of them. I set my out of office to let everyone know who emailed me that I was, taking care of my grandparents and really normalizing that. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
And in the same way that we're seeing, was it Chris Anderson? Is he the founder of TED? I think that's his name.
I may have missed this story. It's not bringing.
I believe his name is Chris Anderson, the founder of TED, or at least the leader, did an interview with Bill Gates, and he asked him really thoughtful questions, and that had really wide viewership. Like, this is a cool moment for some folks to sort of share. There's lots of men who I'm sure would benefit from webinars or live streams on how to sort of do certain things around the house, or how to actually do certain caregiving things, right? There's a lot of room for some tactical sharing and learning. Like Netflix, come on, this is a great moment, right? Create some more children's programming, create some sort of more content to lead people in their new roles, in their new capacities right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question here from Corey. Do you think remote working requires leaders to schedule meetings with their team more frequently to replace the quote unquote open door time? Or is it sufficient to create a virtual open door time where you just work at your desk with your camera on and people can pop in? It's a good question.
I think it depends on your people and how they work best. I think it's really important to have as much, at least some daily FaceTime actually each day. But then also I'm hearing a lot of folks saying that, and I think this is tied to, leaders worrying that work's not getting done, or worrying about productivity, or worrying that trust piece, right, that we sort of started with. I'm also hearing a lot of leaders who are checking in too much. And from my perspective, one of the most beautiful things about having the privilege to work from home is that you can get this sort of free and open space to get into that flow, right? If you're in the knowledge economy, that's how you can get some of the sort of best work done and actually in some of the most efficient ways, right? Without the interruptions of people in real time sort of swinging by your desk. So I'd say it depends on the nature of your work and how your team works, but these are the conversations to actually just be having with your team, right? Like, how much time do folks need? How much sort of virtual FaceTime do people really need? And how much can you give them sort of these flex rooms for flow?
Yeah. I think Sarah knows probably where I'll go with this, but I'm also a big fan of Jason Fried and David Hannemeyer Hansen. They're the co-founders of an organization called 37 Signals. They build a productivity tool called Basecamp, and they wrote exactly that book right there. It doesn't have to be crazy at work. They've written Rework. They, I think, are some of the leaders of the how we work conversation. And our organization runs on Basecamp. I have a 30-minute one-to-one with all of the staff on a weekly basis, and those one-to-ones aren't intended for work stuff. It's really getting to know and create space for how they're doing, and getting feedback on how I'm leading, how we're working as an organization, those kinds of things. And then a lot of the checking in on the work that's being done, a lot of that can be done in write-ups, right? Like, we live in a culture where we send text messages, WhatsApps, Facebook comments, and we think it one line at a time. But if we create space and nudges and prompts where we're asking people to share back their work and their progress and how these projects and outcomes and whatnot are going, and we let them write in 3-4 paragraphs, we're going to see new levels of thought and depth and heart into the work. And I think that that's a great opportunity to get more out of your people and bother them less as well. Yeah. All right. Just in terms of timing here, I want to respect everyone's time. We have one last question. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll wish everyone a good day. I feel like it is a good time to train teams on things you may not have time to work on when you're crazy busy and in the office. Can you recommend other leadership training or programs that would be good for teams to take?
Well, I mean, we both definitely love what the Nightingales have shared out. I think this is a really important time to be having conversations relating to diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of the peripheral conversations that come from those. And those, to me, are really about leadership. I think often they're not framed as such, but to me, they're some of the most critical components of humans who want to lead. So I think this is a really great time. And I know a lot of organizations have scrambled to get their curriculum online. Oh, speaking of,
your coworker there.
This is Gordon. Gordon likes to bark in the middle of really important calls, and also just pop his head in. So I'd say there's so much really awesome content out right now. Our team, we're launching our e-learning next week. Jake, you've got lots of programming that you can be sharing with folks, right?
Yeah. I think, if I want to pick up on time to work when you're crazy busy and in the office. Yeah. Unfortunately, equity-related training, which is leadership training, to build on what Sarah was saying, it exists on kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs in workplaces, and people think of it as a luxury. And this is something that we do when when we're seeking identity and belonging and those kinds of things. And a lot of organizations are going to revert back to the bottom of the hierarchy, and they're going to be thinking about shelter and food. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of these issues, if we applied an equitable lens, could be better off. And so I think, if you're too busy to do equity training when you're in the office and whatnot, it's a great time to invest in those conversations now, because you'll have a richer understanding of your colleagues, of what everyone in society is going through right now. And you'll come out on the other side a better employee and a better person. And I think we can squeeze in one more question here before we let everyone go. Rekha asks, do you think work policies, practices, and culture will significantly change post-COVID-19? Squeeze that in because it was a really juicy question.
You think Policies, practices, and cultures. I sure as hell hope so. And I think it goes back to the whole piece of it's up to us. It's up to all of us, right, to push and pull and tweak and nudge and sort of refuse to go back to any type of quote unquote norm. I don't think it's possible, but I also know orgs are going to try. There's going to be plenty that try to revert back. And I think that'll be a really hard lesson that they'll see that doesn't work for our people anymore. Our people are different. Our business is different. We have to be different. So to me, I hope it will all be a lot different.
I'm not going to add anything to that because I think you summed it up really great. Sarah, where can people find and follow you and learn more about Feminuity?
We're on feminuity.org. All of our social channels are just sort of at Feminuity. All my stuff is under Sarah Saska.
Awesome. And if anyone is interested in some of the work that Next Gen Men is doing, aside from kind of our Equity Leaders Workplace Initiative, we've created this NGM Circle of Care. We're really creating space for conversations folks aren't traditionally having. And tomorrow our theme is Lovers in a Dangerous Time. So we're going to be talking about healthy relationships, at home with your partner. If you're in a relationship where folks are quarantined in different spaces, how do you keep those things going? So be sure to check out nextgenmen.ca as well. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing some of your time, knowledge, and expertise. I hope everyone goes and checks out your resource, and I'm sure you and I will talk again soon.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. And yeah, if anyone has ideas on how we can make this program or process more accessible, we would love to learn.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Stay healthy, stay safe, wash your hands.